Hey everyone, good morning. Here with you again on a Saturday, and we're going to talk about the book of Esther today. Esther, very interesting book and very unique in the sense that it is the only book of the Bible where God's name is not mentioned. No Yahweh, no Elohim, no Adonai, no names whatsoever. Why is that? Well, a lot of scholars and theologians believe, remember, Israel is in captivity in Babylon, or actually, Persia is now the reigning superpower. And a lot of people believe that God's name is not mentioned because the Persians had their own gods. There was kind of a competitive thing going on here. They didn't want Yahweh's name mentioned whatsoever. So even though they gave the Jews religious freedom, they did not want any kind of recognition in a book that would possibly be circulated throughout the land. So that's why it had to pass through the hands of censors, and the name of God is not mentioned at all. Although very much he is implied, his work is implied throughout the book, as we'll see. So we see God still actively involved in the people of Israel, following them into their captivity. And Esther is a young Jewish girl, about 20 years of age, most commentators believe, and she is hidden away like Joseph or David for a certain time until the purposes of the Lord are revealed at a specific time. She is one who saves her people, the Jews, until the deliverer can come forth, and that being the Messiah, even though that's hundreds of years later. So we have here the key scripture in the book is in chapter 4 and verse 14. Mordecai, who is either her cousin or her uncle, translations say one or the other, he says to her, "If you remain silent at this time, relief and deliverance will arise for the Jews from another place, and you and your father's house will perish. And who knows whether you have not attained royalty for such a time as this." So let's backtrack a little bit here. We have another king on the scene, Ahasuerus, if I'm even pronouncing that correctly. Let's call him Xerxes. That was another name for him. And not Artaxerxes, Xerxes. So he holds this huge banquet, lasts many days, and he has a queen named Vashti. And in chapter 1, he and all his cronies are drunk, eunuchs and diplomats and princes and all these people, and he decides to bring Vashti out to show off her beauty. It says, "For she was very beautiful," in verse 11, chapter 1. Vashti doesn't like this. So she rejects the invitation to come, or actually a command to come by the king to show herself off in front of all these drunken people. So the eunuchs get together and they tell the king, this is very, very wrong for her to do this, and she should be deposed. The king becomes angry. In verse 17, they say the queen's conduct will become known to all the women, causing them to look with contempt on their husbands by saying, "King Ahasuerus commanded Queen Vashti to be brought in his presence, and she did not come." So they have the king create an edict to depose of Vashti, and a thing is created here, kind of like a glorified beauty contest, if you will, to find a successor. So they bring in all these young ladies, virgins, and they go through purification rites, beautifying them for, I think it's almost a whole year, until one of them is shown to be the winner of the beauty contest, if I can put it that way. And it becomes Esther. Now, this is amazing because she's a Jew, although she hasn't revealed her nationality, her origin. She's an orphan. to any of the Persians. So she becomes the favored one. Ahasuerus marries her. She becomes the queen. She's taken to the royal palace. And it says the king loved Esther more than all these other women. Remember, they had concubines and all of that. She finds favor, kindness with him. And in place of Vashti, they have a big banquet again. Now, another thing that takes place here is some people try to do harm to the king. They want to kill him, assassinate him. And Mordecai finds out about the plot, reveals it to Esther. It's known to the king, and he has both of these people hanged on a gallows. Although nothing is given credit to Mordecai about this. It's just not done. So that is leading up to the story of Haman in chapter 3, who's kind of like the Judas of the Old Testament. He is promoted from various sources. He's advanced. He's got authority. He's the king's right-hand man. And he is incensed over the fact that Mordecai will not pay homage to him. He will not bow down to him, stand up in his presence, none of that. And Haman is filled with rage, it says in verse 5, chapter 3. Eventually, he goes to the king and he convinces him that these Jews, which they knew Mordecai was one, are disloyal subjects, rebellious people. They need to be done away with. And not only exterminated, but their property seized as well. Can you remember, or maybe not remember, but you're probably familiar with Hitler's regime in Nazi Germany. That was the same anti-Semite kind of plot and carried out to the fact that 6 million Jews were exterminated, the Holocaust. So Haman comes up with this plot, and Esther learns of it, okay? And what happens is she has to appear before the king, but the king, his presence is only determined if he holds out the royal scepter and you touch it, and then you're allowed to come into his presence, even his wife. So she goes to him, and in the meantime, Mordecai is kind of like telling her, you need to go to the king and you need to intercede on our behalf. So they come up with, in chapter 4, verse 1, they put on sackcloth, ashes. They go out, wail loudly, bitterly, and up until the king's gate, because nobody could enter the king's gate with sackcloth on. They fast, they pray. They got the whole entourage praying and fasting for the Jewish people. While this is going on, Haman, again, filled with rage, has a scaffold built to hang Mordecai on. That's what he is looking to do, and he's going to go to the king and ask permission to have this done. So Esther is kind of like choosing a dangerous path here, identifying herself with the Jews eventually, but first she goes to the king and he grants her permission to come, and she says, I want to give a banquet for you and Haman. And so they come. They like good living, going to be good food and drink there. So they come. And remember, Haman has got his people doing a scaffold for Mordecai at some point in time, very soon. So we have the king and Haman come, and he says, what can I do for you, Esther? I'll give you up to half of the kingdom. She says, come to another banquet that I'll give tomorrow for you and Haman. Haman's overjoyed with this. He's thinking he's gotten favor of the queen now. So they both come the next day, and they're sitting in the king's palace. He's on his throne, and something happens here before that, before the second banquet, that the king cannot sleep the night before the second banquet, and he is looking into the chronicles and finds the report of the assassination attempt. And he finds out that Mordecai was the one who found this out. And he says, what honor or dignity has been bestowed on Mordecai? They said, nothing. No one has done anything for him. He calls him Haman. The irony of this, Haman is coming to ask the king for Mordecai to be hanged. And the king says, what shall be done for someone who has done honor to the king? And Haman thinks, it must be me. And he said, let him be, have a royal crown on him and a royal robe and be paraded around on a horse that no one has ever ridden on. The king says, that's good. Get Mordecai, put a crown on his head, a robe around him, lead him on a horse, parade him through the city, and says, thus shall it be done to the man who honors the king. Can you imagine Haman at this point in time? Mortified, embarrassed, because other people know what he's intending to do, his family, for one, and his guards. So he's parading Mordecai around, probably has his head hanging off the ground. And then, right after this, they come and take him to the second banquet with Esther, having the food and drink and all these things. And the king again says, what can I do for you, Esther? And she reveals her identity. She pleads for her life. This wicked Haman is trying to exterminate my people, the Jews. The king rises up in anger, goes out into the garden, kind of cooling himself off. Haman is put on the spot and starts pleading for his life. Esther is on a couch, and he falls on her and is pleading for his life. The king comes back in, sees this, and says he's even trying to take advantage of her, assault her with me out of the house. Or in the house. So they come, they throw a bag over his head, they lead him out, and Haman is hanged on the very gallows he has prescribed for Mordecai. If that's not the sovereignty of God, I don't know what is. I mean, that's just incredible, that turn of event. So what else here? The king sees the Jews, of which his wife is one, Esther, and he throws away the whole idea of exterminating the Jews. And we have the holiday of Purim coming after that. The book kind of closes with the establishment of a feast of Purim, which is a day of thanksgiving, that kind of a thing of what we would know. They have food, they give presents to one another. That's coming up, by the way. I think it's March the 13th. And they give Mordecai the place that Haman had held, the seat that was vacated by him. The feast is even celebrated today, which shows you the accuracy of this book. And the Jews are escaped. They escape from extermination, and they prepare to return to their own land in Israel in anticipation of a coming Messiah, which doesn't happen for quite some time, but they don't know that. So, amazing story here. Even Haman's sons are hanged as well, because they would have been considered a potential threat to the Jews if they were allowed to live, especially if the king had died off or was replaced or whatever. History shows that nations that once favored the Jewish presence in their midst, sooner or later, they are allowed the rise of anti-Semitism. And that is still at work, even in our country today, especially in our country. Israel needs to be prayed for, the peace of Jerusalem, these kinds of things, they need to be not only prayed for, but supported. Monetarily, they're poor. The Jewish people, as a friend of mine pointed out, are probably not poor in Jerusalem itself. They're poor in other lands like Poland and Russia. Israel's a very prosperous nation. So we have Esther read in synagogues today, and the book confirms, as I mentioned, that God is faithful to keep his promise to deliver his people from oppression and destruction. He did this in this past century, 1948. I said that after we talked about Ezra. The Jews were given their own land. So this is the story of Esther. Even though the name of God is not in the book, you can sense his presence as you read the story. His work is implied there, a work of deliverance, and his sovereignty really stands out. I mean, those were not coincidences that Haman is hung on the very gallows that he prepares for Mordecai. Mordecai takes his seat, and Esther is, honored throughout history, especially among the Jews, as the one who saved her people. She was the one who brought the people together to fast and pray. She was the one who put herself in danger even to go to the king and petition for her people. So that's the story of Esther, and I wanted to conclude that today. And I'm going to let you know that the next few weeks I'm not going to be around. We've got several things going on, including a wedding. I'm going to see my son in Virginia, and we're going to have a little R&R time. So I will not be with you until I believe it'll be March the 8th. All right, so I got just about a solid month here where I'm going to take some time off. In the meantime, continue to abide in the Lord and his goodness. And, we'll probably come back, and I'm thinking of getting into the books of Joshua, Judges, and Ruth when I return. So we'll cover those three books, probably the books of Samuel and Kings afterward. Get ready, more snow on the way tonight. Okay, have a good rest of the day. Bless you.